Hi, I'm Jedi Master Josh. I hope everybody had a fun and safe New Year's Eve, or at least a fun New Year's Eve, if you can't be safe. And now that it is 2018, many people are looking forward to what is going to happen in the future, in this year particularly, in some cases, especially when you look at the midterms that are coming up that will be rather consequential. But I want to take a look back. I want to take a look back at Trump's top accomplishments of 2017. I think it's important to point out some of the major things that have happened under the Trump administration, many of them due directly to Trump himself. And it truly has been a very monumentous year in many ways. Obviously, Trump being president, just in general, is something that causes people to express all different types of emotions, and it drives some people crazy. The fact that he's president, and it is seen as a godsend to others. And then, of course, there's other people who are somewhere a little bit more in the middle. And me, as a conservative and libertarian on some issues, I'd say I lean more towards the libertarian side. I am very pleased with many of the things, the vast majority of the things that have happened under the Trump administration. So I want to take time to list the biggest ones. This definitely is not a list of all of his accomplishments, but certainly I think it is the ones that had the most impact in one way or the other. And I want to go through them, starting with number 10, which is going to be the TPP. The Trans-Pacific Partnership was a massive multilateral trade agreement between a number of nations that was going to basically give up certain aspects of our national sovereignty, and how it was going to do that is pretty simple. The document, the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, is what's called a living document, meaning that it evolves over time. And for example, countries that weren't originally added to the TPP could be added to it. And this would be decided by the different nations involved in a sort of committee-based sort of system. And it would put that power out of the United States Congress, where it clearly lies, because Congress is supposed to regulate basically trade policy with foreign nations. This would give that power to, again, multinational committees. And of all places, the Huffington Post had a really good piece that summed up the problems of the TPP. So, from the Huffington Post, is TPP a living document? Senator Jeff Sessions had this reaction to the living part of the TPP. The predictable and surely desired result of the TPP is to put greater distance between the governed and those who govern. It puts those who make the rules out of reach of those who live under them, empowering unelected regulators who cannot be recalled or voted out of office. In turn, it diminishes the power of the people's bulwark, their constitutionally formed Congress. The piece then goes to point out another aspect of the TPP that was going to be problematic for sure. The fact that the heads of the different committees that were going to be representing the United States were going to be headed by some very shady individuals, you could say. The piece goes on. Our chief trade negotiator for TPP came from Citigroup. Similarly, a former lobbyist for Monsanto and other corporate global clients headed our negotiating team for agriculture. So you've got people that are going to be heading these committees that are going to almost certainly put the interests of giant corporations and mega banks before the interests of the people of the United States. In TPP, all authority works through the president. If the U.S. Trade Representative wants to expand investor rights, ignore labor violations, or interpret language to benefit one industry or another, TPP has no separation of powers, no checks and balances, and only a token public process. And President Trump, very early on in his presidency, scrapped the TPP, and it was a campaign promise of his. It was something he followed through on. And definitely a very significant move by President Trump. And he is doing this in favor of bilateral agreements with countries. So we'll have a deal with one country at a time instead of a multilateral and multinational deal that in many ways was absolutely a bad deal for the country, and President Trump doesn't like bad deals. So it was good to see him scrap that. Definitely a very key thing for him to do. And that now brings me to number 9, which would be scrapping the Paris Climate Agreement. The Paris Climate Agreement was a treaty essentially, but President Obama decided to pass it through executive fiat, to use the executive branch to pass it through instead of having it go through the proper channel of the Senate, having 2/3 of the Senate ratify it as a treaty, which it, in my opinion, clearly was. Obama, however, called it an executive agreement. What it would have done, essentially, is it would have made us, the United States, lower our CO2 emissions into the projected future and meet certain goals, while other countries would not have to limit their energy production when when countries like China and India contribute much more to harming the planet. For sure, their technologies are much dirtier. So it would have restricted the United States and our energy output potential, while significantly, while allowing other countries to go along basically as they were already projected to. And that gets explained in a piece from the National Review. The key charade of the Paris Agreement. Major developing countries offered commitments, quote unquote, for emissions reductions that only mirrored their economy's existing trajectories. Thus, for instance, China committed to reach peak emissions by 2030, in line with the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory's prior analysis. India committed to improving its emissions per unit of GDP, at a rate slower than that metric was already improving. President Obama, meanwhile, pledged America to concrete and aggressive emission cuts that would require genuine and costly change. So again, here we have another just a bad deal overall for America, for the United States. It was going to make us far less competitive in terms of energy output, and it would have again favored countries that are contributing. Are some of the biggest contributors to global warming. If you believe that global warming is a serious threat, the Paris Climate Agreement would have done very little, virtually nothing, to actually combat climate change and to actually lower emissions across the board. So it was a good thing that President Trump did this. It was something that he did on his own, in the sense that he had, even within his own cabinet, a lot of pressure to keep the Paris Climate Agreement, pressure from people like Rex Tillerson. So a very key, monumentous, really, thing that President Trump did in scrapping the Paris Climate Agreement, and absolutely he deserves to be applauded for doing so. And that brings me now to number 8. Standing up to the NFL and PC culture in general. So President Trump has always been against politically correct culture. I mean, everything from not being willing to say anchor baby to calling Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas. When President Trump was running in the 2016 election, when he was still a candidate, that was one of the things that drew people to him, was the fact that he was against PC culture, and it's something that I definitely do admire about him in many ways. I think it can maybe go a little too far sometimes, but that's a price I'm willing to pay. Some snowflakes can melt it. That's okay. And what really highlights this is the fact that President Trump stood up to the NFL. So the NFL's audience is, pretty conservative, and when players started kneeling for the national anthem, many of them saw it as disrespecting the flag, disrespecting the country, and quite frankly, I think it is. And because of that, many of the fans didn't want to see these players protesting in that aspect. And President Trump came out and voiced his opinion about that, saying that they should basically be fired. That caused the NFL to then double down on the national anthem protests and the fact that the players are kneeling, and it certainly has hurt their viewership. They've been declining in numbers for quite some time now, and it's pretty clear based on polls that it is in fact due directly to the fact that these players are protesting the national anthem. So definitely got to applaud President Trump for standing up just in general to PC culture, but for sure to the NFL, because the idea of these multi-millionaire, these NFL players with multi-million-dollar contracts are living in the only country in the world where that would be possible for them. So it's pretty just pretty ridiculous to see them disrespecting the United States, in that fashion. So now that brings me to number 7, which is declaring Jerusalem the capital of Israel. Get ready for all the anti-Semites to come out in full force on this one. So all the way back in 1995, and since 1995, when Congress basically said that Jerusalem should be the capital of Israel. Since then, every president from Bill Clinton to Barack Obama have promised to declare Jerusalem the capital of Israel, and also to obviously move the embassy there, because that's again where you would have the embassy in the capital. And Israel, in my point of view, is the capital, or Jerusalem rather, is the capital of Israel. It has been the Jewish homeland for thousands of years. They won a war to basically reclaim Jerusalem, and on and on and on. But again, this has been something that Congress has said should be the case. This is something that presidents have said should be the case. And in this piece from the Times of Israel, it really highlights how insane it is that this is seen as such a controversial move by President Trump. Senate unanimously passes bill marking 50 years since Jerusalem reunification, co-sponsored by 17 senators, including Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. The text calls on the legislative body to recognize the half-a-century landmark since Israel captured the eastern part of the city during the 1967 Six-Day War. Quote, Jerusalem should remain the undivided capital of Israel, in which the rights of every ethnic and religious group are protected, the resolution states, adding that there has been a continuous Jewish presence in Jerusalem for 3 millennia. It also says that, quote, Jerusalem is the holy city and the home for people of the Jewish, Muslim, and Christian faiths. So, very clearly, This is something that should have been done. This is something that presidents have promised in the past, and President Trump is now following through on his promise, and it is definitely a very monumentous thing, and it has everyone from the liberals to the Palestinians basically going insane. So that's when it was the right thing to do. And now that brings me to number 6, which is the Trump travel ban being fully implemented. Very little under the Trump presidency has caused as many liberal heads to explode as the Trump travel ban, which was blocked by liberal judges, and finally has gone through the Supreme Court in its final third iteration and has been passed. So this is from CNN. Supreme Court lets full Trump travel ban take effect. Issued in September, the third edition of the travel ban placed on varying levels of restrictions on foreign nationals from 8 countries: Chad, Iran, Libya, North Korea, Syria, Venezuela, Somalia, and Yemen. Lower courts in 2 separate challenges had partially blocked the ban. The order is a significant temporary win for the Trump administration, which has fought all year to impose a travel ban against citizens of several Muslim-majority countries. Monday's order means it can be enforced while challenges to the policy make their way through the legal system. And the idea was that it was a Muslim ban, which is totally ridiculous. It was not a Muslim ban whatsoever. The countries with the highest Muslim population and the largest percentage of a Muslim population were not on the list of countries to be banned. So the idea that it was a Muslim ban is pretty silly. It was a ban on countries that have significant terror problems and are, not able to produce any real information on the people that we're bringing into our country, so we can't properly vet them. And that is the reason for the ban, not to ban Muslims. And that brings me now to number 5, Obamacare mandate repealed. Well, Congress was unwilling and unable to pass an actual repeal and replacement plan for Obamacare. President Trump moved significantly in that direction by repealing the individual mandate. Now, one of the major myths that surrounds the individual mandate is that 13 million people are going to lose their health insurance. Now, it's funny because the liberals will actually cite the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, for these numbers, but apparently they didn't actually read the study, because if they did, they would know that what they're saying is ridiculously silly. So, from the CBO, repealing the individual health insurance mandate, an updated estimate. The number of people with health insurance would decrease by 4 million in 2019 and 13 million in 2017 if the individual mandate penalty was eliminated, but the mandate itself was not repealed. The results would be very similar to those presented in this report. In CBO and JCT's estimation, with no penalty at all, only a small number of people who enroll in insurance because of the mandate under current law would continue to do so solely because of a willingness to comply with the law. So it turns out that if you don't force people to buy crappy Obamacare, then they actually don't want it. So that's a big shocker right there. But it's just hilarious because liberals will cite the CBO study saying that 13 million people are going to lose their healthcare insurance. Bernie Sanders says thousands of people will die. People will die. Well, it's ridiculous. It's just not true. People are going to choose to not have something that sucks that they were forced to buy in the first place. So now moving on to number 4, the economy. It's the economy, stupid. So people in the media and quote-unquote economists and the Democrats were all saying that President Trump was going to be absolutely horrible for the economy, that he was basically going to be like, like some reckless kid with his first credit card when it comes to the economy, and that he was just going to crash it. It was going to be the next depression. You're going to see soup lines 5 miles long, and we are going to look like Venezuela. You're going to have people running around eating cats and dogs. Oh wait, that's socialism that does that, not capitalism. That's right. Well, needless to say, they were all quite wrong about President Trump and the Trump economy. And this is highlighted from an article in The Hill. Trump's growth projections leave economists in disbelief. Trump's bold claims are eliciting scoffs from economists, who argue that such numbers are difficult, if not outright impossible, to meet. Quote, his growth expectations are not realistic. The economy's potential growth is 2%, and to get stronger growth will require immigration reform that provides a path to legalization for the undocumented and a significant increase in skilled legal immigration. He is strongly opposed to this. said Mark Zandi, chief economist at Moody's Analytics. Chief economist. Wow, fancy name, fancy title. Even then, immigration reform will increase potential growth to closer to 2.5%. We may be surprised and get stronger growth, but it wouldn't be prudent to count on it. So what we need is a bunch of illegal immigrants to come into our country, and they will save our economy, and maybe then we can have 2.5% growth, but not if we're going to have President Trump and his evil anti-immigrant ways. So that was all total BS, obviously, and it is pointed out spectacularly in an article from investors.com. Has anyone noticed that Trump's economy keeps beating expectations? At the start of the year, economists were in widespread agreement that inflation-adjusted GDP would grow 2% to 2.3%. The National Associations of Business Economists survey put it at 2.2%. The Congressional Budget Office predicted growth would be at 2.3%, as did Trump's own economists. But annualized growth was 3.1 in the second quarter and 3.3 in the third. The Atlanta Fed's GDP Now measure, which includes economic data available for the fourth quarter up to this point, currently stands at 3.2%. If that holds for the quarter, then growth for the year would be above 2.3%. It would also mark the first time the economy has put together 3 straight quarters of 3% or higher growth since 2005. All of this marks a sharp turnaround from the past 8 years when, under President Obama's economic stewardship, GDP growth never once came close to meeting the consensus forecasts. At the start of 2016, for example, the White House forecast 2.6% growth for the year, and the CBO 2.7%, the actual number 1.5%. So, what you're seeing is a total reversal of that, obviously. You're seeing the numbers that are actually coming out of Trump's administration. The Trump economy is doing much better than it was projected to do. Under Obama, the economy was always doing worse than it was projected to do, and even their projections would not have been stellar. So, the people that were saying that Trump was never going to be able to get 3%, these people called themselves economists. They are looking pretty darn silly at this point. Now I want to go to number 3, ISIS destroyed. So this has been a massive accomplishment of the Trump administration, and one that is criminally underreported. Under President Trump, the scum of the earth ISIS has been absolutely wiped virtually off of the map. Well, President Obama spent time dropping leaflets that would announce when an area was going to be bombed. President Trump has decided to unleash the military and allow them to do what they are good at, which is breaking things and killing people. So this is from the Washington Examiner. Here's how much ground ISIS has lost since Trump took over. On January 20th, the day Trump was inaugurated, an estimated 35,000 ISIS fighters held approximately 17,500 square miles of territory in both Iraq and Syria. As of December 21st, the U.S. military estimates the remaining 1,000 or so fighters, occupy roughly 1,900 miles of mostly barren desert, primarily in Syria, where few people live, and where they will be forced to surrender or die. Between September 2014, when the counter-ISIS campaign began, and January 2017, the U.S.-backed forces in Iraq and Syria liberated 13,200 square miles of territory and 2.4 million people from the Islamic State liberated. In the 11 months since Trump took office, an additional 15,570 square miles have been reclaimed, and 5.3 million people have been liberated. ISIS is now where they belong, a ragtag, group of individuals hiding out in a bunch of caves, doing whatever it is that they do, not running around like an actual military taking over, large areas of territory. We have absolutely crushed them. President Trump has unleashed, sort of changed the rules of engagement and allowed, again, the military to do what it does best, and they are doing quite a good job. So that is a massive accomplishment for the Trump administration. Just an absolute, just destruction and absolute just obliteration of ISIS. Absolutely incredible. And now I want to go to number 2. President Trump's Supreme Court pick and his appellate court appointments. With an open Supreme Court seat, the 2016 presidential election was, for obviously other reasons as well, was one of the most consequential elections in years for sure. And the idea of Hillary Clinton nominating somebody to the Supreme Court to replace Antonin Scalia was nightmarish, absolutely nightmarish. And President Trump followed through on a massive campaign promise, and this is so consequential because these are lifetime appointments, by appointing a absolutely solid, very solid conservative to the Supreme Court in Neil Gorsuch. But it goes even beyond that, and that is highlighted by the Daily Signal. How Trump changed the courts in 2017. While the crowning achievement of the year was clearly the confirmation of Gorsuch to the Supreme Court, it is worth celebrating the fact that the Senate confirmed 12 circuit court judges this year, the largest number of appellate judges confirmed during the first year of any president in history, beating out John Kennedy and Richard Nixon by 1. Well, the Supreme Court hears about 70 cases per year. The federal appellate courts consider roughly 50,000 cases per year. In a very real way, therefore, the buck often stops at the lower appellate courts when it comes to deciding important legal issues. And all of these people have been absolutely great appointments, people who are going to uphold the Constitution, people who are very, very conservative. And this is again, because these are lifetime appointments, these are very consequential moves that the Trump administration, that Trump himself has been making. And I have to give him all the credit in the world and thank him a million times for doing this, because this is absolutely incredible to have such conservative individuals on the Supreme Court and in the appellate court system. These, again, are people that are going to absolutely uphold the Constitution and the rule of law, not act with judicial overreach like some crazy judge in Seattle or some crazy judge in Hawaii would do. So, just, again, a very, very consequential, absolutely monumentous thing that President Trump is doing, and I have to give him all the thanks in the world and applaud him for doing so. And I think he deserves praise across the board from conservatives and Republicans because, again, this is a massive thing that he's done. And that now brings me to number 1. The most consequential accomplishment, the biggest accomplishment, I think, of President Trump's first year, and that is the tax cuts. So the reason that I think these tax cuts are going to be the most consequential, the biggest accomplishment of the Trump administration, at least for the first year, the reason I think that is because these are going to have a very clear impact to people, and they are going to actually impact people's lives directly. With many things that President Trump does, they may very well be things that are in the interest of the United States, that are in the interest of the people of the United States, and they may be things that are going to benefit the people of the United States, but they don't necessarily impact people directly. Now, with the tax cuts, obviously, this was also a legislative accomplishment, and President Trump needed a massive legislative accomplishment. Many of the things that he did throughout the year were through the executive branch, were using his executive powers, many of them rolling back things that Obama did using his executive powers. But with these tax cuts, the Democrats and the media lied. They said that they were not going to be a tax cut, that they were going to increase taxes for people in the middle class, and that they were just going to be a handout to corporations and to the rich. Well, that wasn't true whatsoever, and starting February 2018, the vast majority of people are going to be paying less in their taxes. They're going to be getting less taken out of their paychecks, and And at the end of the year, they're going to find out that under this plan, they are going to be paying significantly less in taxes, or they're going to be owing significantly less in taxes at the end of the year. And because of this, this is going to be a humongous problem for the Democrats, because now people are going to be saving money on their taxes, and they're going to know that it was because of Trump. And this is going to be a big problem for the Democrats in 2018 and certainly in 2020. So they made a crucial mistake in not at least supporting from the very beginning the middle class tax cuts in this bill. It is now going to expose them for the absolute liars that they are. The fact that they misled people 100% about what was going to be in these tax cuts. So that's my list of the top 10 biggest accomplishments of President Trump. So it's been a crazy year. 2017 was a crazy year. And now moving on into 2018, I think the madness is going to continue. President Trump is, is a polarizing figure. He is somebody who has driven the left absolutely insane in America and across the world in many ways. The election of Donald Trump has shaken up the entire world, really, the entire world in many ways. And moving forward, it's going to be very interesting to see how things unfold. All I know is that the liberals are going crazy because they figured by this point President Trump would be in prison, and he is clearly not. He is moving forward with his agenda, and in many ways he is absolutely steamrolling the liberal globalist agenda, which is absolutely fantastic and marvelous to witness. In many ways, I think we are living in quite historic times, and it is very, very interesting to see the craziness as it unfolds. And again, I think in 2018 there will be plenty more madness to come. So that was my video of the top 10 Trump accomplishments. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave me a comment if you would like to follow me on Twitter or Gab. I will leave the links to those in the description. With that, I hope you have a wonderful day, and may the force be with you.